Everyone has a counter drone plan. It looks great on paper. Clean sensor coverage, fast detection, perfect response timeline. And then the first real drone shows up at a different altitude, different signal, different behavior than expected. And suddenly, that plan doesn't work the way anyone thought that it would. Most counter drone plans don't survive the first contact, and that's when we know we're in trouble. Welcome to the Swarm News, where veterans and engineers talk about defensive tech the way that it actually works, not the way it looks in a briefing. I'm Joshua Hill, and this is my co-host.
And I'm Vincent Lewis. I'd like to say thank you to all those who have been following, subscribed, and liked our content. If you haven't, we ask that you follow, like, and subscribe if you like what we are providing, and to let us know in the comments if there's anything that you'd like to hear or know about. With that being said, I got a couple updates on drone news for the industry. Recently, FAA put out a new order that is stating that now there are going to be a lot more legal implications for people doing illegal stuff with drones. So it's no more of people flying and be like, oh, I didn't know, or I'm doing bad stuff with them and think that they'll get away with it. They put out a requirement that FAA Order 2150.3 Charlie, now updated to have legal enforcement that similar to what Ohio already has put in place to basically, if you were caught violating these statutes or this rule, you can be put in a position to now pay thousands of dollars in fines. If you have a Part 107 license, you will be removed from having it, or you will lose it. Your air certification will now not be held, and it could impact your other certifications in the future. Also, it could mean jail time. So you really need to be aware of what you're doing and start to go track what's going on with these changes. Also, the DoD has started to become more apt on small sUAS. Here recently, they put out a call for more small UAS. The Army Installation Contracting Command in Fort Drum is hosting a 2026 Industry Day for a multi-year possible contracts for people who are creating and building blue UAS or sUAS that are compliant to small drones more so. And with that being spare parts, small parts, flight controllers. So if you're a flight controller person, or if you know how to make motors, ESCs, all the things that we've talked about, that there isn't a actual market for in the United, or say there's a market, but not creators or producers of those components in the United States as much, you have an opportunity to get paid. They're saying that the Pentagon or Congress government pretty much has allocated a fiscal budget of about $14.4 billion to be integrated into autonomy for uncrewed systems, and with $3.1 billion of that going towards counter UAS systems across the services. That's a significant amount of money being pushed into the small UAS realm. That's life-changing in some places if you actually have something that's very valuable. So if you're out there and you're doing it, kind of like what we're doing, hey, it's time to hop on the horse and start putting it to use with what your skills and your knowledge is, because that is honestly what we need in the industry. Is a lot of innovation and start to push some of these other companies to be able to provide services and or equipment to people who are looking for it. Because not only is it going to be DoD, you have civilian and hobbyists who really could use this type of tech. So it's within our own country and not outside of it. And that's going to be a key component to, I think, the growth of the industry within the United States. We really need this, and it's great to know that this is happening. You got any thoughts on that, Josh, or anything you want to add?
Yeah, so earlier DoD strategy working on counter small UAS sets, the foundation for today's efforts, organizing activity around ready the force, defend the force, build the team, and explicitly covering home bases, host nations, locations, and contingency sites. So we're also going over we have ongoing events like the 2026 Counter UAS Homeland Security USA conference in Arlington, bringing together defense, homeland security, and industry stakeholders to discuss evolving sUAS threats at military bases, sporting events, and airports, and to examine emergency technical solutions. Another thing that's going on is new interagency guidance on physical protections of critical infrastructures from sUAS under the Emerging Joint Interagency Task Force 401 framework is intended to give forces a common playbook for working with federal and local partners around sensitive sites across the U.S. So it looks like we're moving forward in a lot of things, and like we're realizing where we're falling short and what we need to be doing to fix ourselves and ready ourselves for any of these issues that could be happening. So
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be a significant change in defending our bases, defending our other infrastructure within the United States, and not just be lagging behind, because it's finally starting to become a reality that these smalls are more than just a toy. They're
more than capable.
correct,
Yeah.
significant threat, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I think that's all the news we have. Let's go ahead and get into the episode. Yeah.
I agree.
All right. So there's a gap between how counter UAS is briefed and how it actually plays out. On the slide deck, everything is clean. Sensor sees the target, system classifies the target, response engages or ignores. Done. But in reality, you're dealing with clutter. You've got noise, you've got multiple signals, unknown intent, legal constraints, and decision delays. And that's before we even talk about scale.
Yeah, and from the engineering side, the biggest issues that you come around with is assumptions that most systems are designed around signals, expected flight profiles, controlled environments, which some of that is, but in actuality is built around what the capability for that system needs to be and where and how they want it to fly it and function. Real world doesn't give you that all the time. The specifics to it could be a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about some uncomfortable truths here. Like, people expect counter drone systems to be perfect. Expect them to detect everything, to track everything, decide instantaneously, and that's just not realistic. In a real environment, you don't know intent immediately. You don't know if it's a hobbyist, if it's a test, or is this a hostile threat? And you don't always have authority to act. So now you're balancing speed, accuracy, and consequences, and it's just not easy.
Yeah, and technically, detection isn't an easy situation. When you think about the capabilities of a system having to find in a radar's aspect the cross section of something that's smaller than the size of a bird from what you see, or something that just doesn't even show up on your radar. It takes a lot. You're dealing with RF noise in the area, you're dealing with terrain, you're dealing with weather, dealing with overlapping signals, and you're dealing with a lot of other components that may not even be considered as a problem right up front, say snow, rain, different aspects that you wouldn't expect something to be flying in, but you add that into the process and it'll cause you a lot. So you go to low cost drones with unpredictable signatures, and it brings you to a place where you have a system that might be detected, but classifications and confidence of that, or classifying and getting your confidence in that, is going to be really hard to get.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of systems perform great in testing, which as an operator, I've seen. You get in there, they give you all the like perfect scenario, the perfect like setup, and here's the data that you're going to be looking at, and you start scanning through it and you see it, and everything works in that controlled environment. Known drones, I mean, do they have a controlled environment? The predictable behavior, is it really what we expect it to be? Then they hit the real world. Now you've got multiple drones. You've got mixed signals. You've got unknown operators. You've got degraded comms. And suddenly your clean, perfect detection chain isn't clean anymore. So are we working to the best of our ability?
Yeah, and a lot of times I don't think we really are. When you really look at it, you're at a place to where, like, if you look at the things that we have just in, like we were discussing in the news updates, it's taking now the government to kind of putting a emphasis on the things that need to be created, because we don't have it in our own emphasis of our own drone architecture in general. So other countries have already amplified their own needs and have already taken on that and created the things that they needed. They found ways to take the testing that they deem is needed and realized, hey, this is something we need to go forward with, because we can see the benefits of these small aircraft, especially at a lower level. So when you look at the testing environments and trying to remove that chaos from it, it takes a little bit, but the chaos is the baseline for when you're looking at real operations. Sensor fusion helps, but radars, they see some things, maybe not at all. The RF sees something, but again, they don't see it all. EO sees something and they don't see. So you have gaps between all these situations that needs to be brought to light and solutions to find on each area, because whenever you come up with one solution, someone's going to find out another solution to make that a problem again. So it's kind of like the chicken before the egg situation. Which one happens and which one do you need to keep being ready to update and prepare for? And this doesn't always align perfectly, and it creates uncertainty in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so I mean, with your RF discussion, let's go ahead and talk about sensors. Everyone wants a system that sees everything, which we just discussed. However, that doesn't exist. Each sensor, as you just said, has its own limitations. You're either going to have radar clutter, you're going to have ambiguity with your RF ranges, you're going to have visual line of sight issues. There's going to be latency. No matter how close you are to your transmitter, there is going to be a short latency period for it to be able to react to what it's doing. I mean, it happens. So, what happens when that happens? You get partial information and you still have to decide, what am I doing?
Yeah, and when you look at it, think of it in the case of, like, say, radars, and they have to do clutter mapping. Typically, you're taking away the area where that radar does not think it needs to look at, because it is a area that's not something that it can see through or needs to see through, or whatever the determination is for that, which that also now becomes an area where it can be a vulnerability, because if the person is looking at it needs to know, oh, well, it doesn't look there, now we can use that as an advantage to ourselves. So it turns into a situation where you're constantly having to take consideration of other ways of making your systems layered, and that it comes to a place to where the layering makes sense, so that you're not wasting your time and energy to have systems in place that may not even need it. And also taking into consideration of what that risk is, if there's a risk of seeing something that may come from there or not. And every sensor gives probability but not certainty. There are certain situations where you're not going to always get it. If think of it like if a radar is hitting, the reason for stealth came because they knew that radar could be dispersed. So now it made it to where the case of where a radar that was created from before to recognize when there's massive targets coming in, that went away as soon as stealth aircraft came about. So it's still useful, but not in all cases, and it's also a vulnerability. And when you have multiple sensors disagreeing on what is seen and what isn't, someone has to resolve that conflict and make it where they come up with a plan to make that risk mitigated, and or a solution that they can just be acceptable with. And that's where systems get stressed out a lot.
Yeah. So let's move on and talk about some legal and authority constraints. I mean, here's the part people outside operations underestimate, right? You can't always act immediately. There are legal constraints. There's airspace rules, there's engagement authority, you have identification requirements. So even if you detect something early, you might not be allowed to engage yet, and that delays matters.
Yeah. And when you really look at, say, in that situation, civilian side, where there's now a legal repercussion of doing things, imagine how many situations have gone without those repercussions prior to that. And what people found vulnerabilities, and they were able to do those without actually having to worry about getting, in a problem or getting any type of legal instance of getting there's license taken or having to pay any fines or stuff like that. And from a systems perspective, that delays things and changes and everything, because they need the data, to be honest. Even though those are the situations like that, something being illegal, you kind of needed to know, is that even a problem that needs to be addressed or made into a concern? And if the system assumes that, or if a counter system assumes that the system is instantaneous response, or if the deciding agency decides it needs to be at a place to where they can really evaluate the need, and it has to not lag too far behind, and they have to give it to our agencies. Now they're finally starting to figure out, we got to pick it up. They're making changes and adjustments faster than what it has been. It still may not be as fast as like a small business with the ability to be agile, but it's getting better. And your entire timelines are starting to see shifts in the whole hierarchy of this industry, from the components to being needed and made, to the architecture of these systems being put to use, to the cities and governments that needing to see change with it. They're all working. The good thing is we're starting to see some synchronicity. A lot of this that's working out, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're just talking about, let's get into those coordination gaps that do exist. I mean, once we add coordination, we're talking, like you said, multiple agencies, multiple systems, different jurisdictions, right? Information sharing isn't always going to be instant.
Mm-hmm.
So one system sees something, but the response chain is gonna still take time. And in that time, the drone keeps moving, whether we've given it any kind of idea of what we want it to do or not.
Yeah. And kind of that situation, the system may not be caught up with the changes needed, or the changes in decision making may not be as relevant to what the systems are capable of doing. You know, there may be capabilities on these aircraft that isn't being utilized, or it's being utilized, but it's at a place where it's a gray area, you know, and interpolations of what's needed and the improvements are very, fluid, especially the things we're doing now. When you see these aircraft that are coming about, like you see DARPA putting in a situation where they're like knowing that a heavy lift drone is needed, but they can't give a company the okay to just go fly it their normal stuff without having their regulations being needed, and then those aircraft having to now adjust to a requirement without having the needs for what they have on their side completely there. So, data formats and latency and network reliability is something that's being, again, a fluid functional requirement as it goes. And everybody's having to figure it all out and meet those requirements. While the systems, there are some out there that can they do it properly? Are they doing it properly? And you can't assume everything connects instantly either. So you're in a conundrum of going back and forth between systems being completely able and some not, the areas of legalities being there and they're not, and just meeting those needs is going to be really kind of interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does this all mean, right? So, counter drone isn't about perfection, it's about resilience. You design for uncertainty, delays, imperfect data, because that's the environment you're actually in.
Yeah. And the counter systems are having to adjust because it's not going to be a one flavor meets all situation. And those systems are going to have to work around their vulnerabilities and find ways to be upgradable to fit into what those needs are going to be now and in the future. And think about the past systems that worked but may not have worked right at the time and may be the actual answer to the situations now. And those systems may be a system that degrades gracefully over time, but they also have to be more valuable to the end user in way that they work. And the system has to work not perfectly, but at least work as best it can in the ideal condition that it's been given.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we said, most counter drone plans look solid until they meet reality. That's not failure. That's just the nature of the systems that succeed are the ones built with that in mind. If this conversation made you think about how counter UAS actually works, share it with someone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you guys. And hopefully you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll talk to you later.